Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host, Jordan Fasso, and today we are continuing the season preview series, going with Essendon today, the Bombers, and we're going to go through, do a bit of review of their year last year, a little bit to break down there, and then go through the ins and outs of the team over the off-season, get into my general expectations for the team, go through some of their backs, forwards, mids, that sort of thing, how I think those things are going to come together for the Bombers, and then just a sort of players to watch section as well, and then go through the where I think they're going to end up this year on the ladder, and give them a bit of my sense check of why I think they're going to be there in terms of the power ranking and stuff as well. So with that being said, let's get into the Bombers. And last year they went 11 wins, 11 losses and a draw on the year, and finished 11th on the ladder. So, a bit of symmetry there for the Bombers in the end. But it started out as a bit of a promising year for the Bombers, probably one of the most promising in quite some time. Under Brad Scott, they had the, what was it called, the Essendon Edge whole logo or motto going on at the start of the year, and it sort of became apparent that the team's ladder position was perhaps a bit of smoke and mirrors for a little bit there, and I don't know. It was a bit of an anomaly, I guess, in that way, and I think I said it at the time, at the end of round 17, that the last time that a team was in the top four after round 17 with a percentage of less than 100 was Geelong in 2000, and Geelong were, of course, fourth as well, and they had a percentage of 97-ish%. So in the end, Geelong ended up making the finals that year, but the Bombers' end to 2024 was pretty poor, and ending the year 1-6 after round 17 and being fourth with a double chance was definitely not on their bingo card, I would have imagined. And this has been sort of a trend with the Bombers in terms of starting seasons with promise and then falling over late in the season. And unfortunately for the Bombers, it was only themselves and Freo who didn't make the 8 after being in the 8 at the end of round 17, and I guess that's sort of why I was sort of saying it's a bit of an anomaly. Their sort of start to the season wasn't as beefy as didn't have the meat on it as maybe some would have thought, and when you've got a percentage of like lower than 100 in that scenario, I think it's a little bit of a cause for concern unless you've been bashed up a few times. So the fact that they were just getting over the line in some close games meant that a bit of luck was on their side, I think. But despite the disappointing end to the year, they definitely still had some bright spots that are absolutely worth highlighting. Sam Durham, I'm extremely high on, and he showed he can potentially be an All-Australian calibre player in the years to come, something that Zach Merritt desperately needs help with in the midfield. And of course Nate Caddy as well showed plenty of promise as a young key forward, and he's another one that I'm extremely high on. I think Brad Scott in general is a good coach. I think he's going to get the most that he can out of this group as well, and he showed that he is the sort of, although he may rub some people the wrong way, he's the sort of coach that most teams would absolutely love managing them. He's a no-nonsense sort of guy, and he's seen the success that his brothers had down in Geelong, and they're obviously cut from the same cloth, being twins. That sort of comes with the territory, I guess, but I think that he's the right man to get them back into the finals, and it made, after talking through and going through their season preview, just making notes for this episode, I don't necessarily think that's going to be this year, but I think that in the years to come that he's building something more sustainable than they have in the past sort of 10-15 years anyway. So I think Bombers fans should be excited with the appointment of Brad Scott. I don't think there's any reason to think he's not going to be the coach to lead them back into the finals. So a few good things from their year last year that we learned. Let's get stuck into the ins and outs of the year. Coming into the list, we had Angus Clark, Archer Daywicks, Tom Edwards, Cale Guerin, Zach Johnson, Isaac Kako, Jaden Ewan, Jackson Pryor, and Reece Unwin. So, on the outside, by the same token, sorry about that, my phone is vibrating. Anyway, out we have Kane Baldwin, Jaden Davey, Dyson Heppel, of course, great career, all-time great of the Bombers, and unfortunately, didn't get to win a final in the end, poor Dice. But joining him was Nick Hind as well, getting delisted. Heppel didn't get delisted at all. Nick Hind did. Jaden Hunter, Jake Kelly, Jake Stringer left, Tex Wangadine, and Sam Wiedemann as well. So they're all the ins and outs of the Bombers. Probably the main one that we'll touch on later a bit is Isaac Kako coming into the team. Jackson Pryor, we'll see if he can. He's a mature player. We'll see if he's able to provide them anything. But yeah, going out, I think of the main sort of things. As I said, Heppel, great career. Nick Hind, they gave him as much run as they could at the end of the year, who's often the sub and provided them with a bit of run. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, he's just not the sort of player they wanted to prioritise going forward, which is the right call. And I think getting rid of Jake Stringer finally as well is a perfectly valid thing that they did as well. So, get stuck into some of the expectations now. And I think they are in an interesting position heading into the year. Of course, they have some senior guys who are ready to win now, like Zach Merritt, of course, fearless leader, awesome player. Love watching Zach Merritt play. Kyle Langford, another one who's pretty solid, and has the ability to kick 40+ goals each year, permitting he stays as a forward. And then Jordan Ridley as well. So those guys, all at the top of their game, ready to win now, but they have a bit of a void in talent, I think, until you get to that next crop of players who maybe aren't ready to contribute to a winning just yet. Like, doesn't mean that they're not gonna be, but I'm not sure that that draft where they got Nick Cox, what draft was that, the 2021 or 2020 draft, that they just really haven't come on, the Archie Perkins and stuff, as much as you probably would want to follow up that sort of older group of players. So I think that void of players that they have is sort of hurting them at the moment in terms of talent. But I think there's still a real chance for them to springboard up the ladder next year with another season of development under their belt. Zach Merritt's only 29, so they can sort of afford to have another year of development, in my opinion, and still not, I know that's sort of wasting another year of his prime, but I don't think it's a waste when you can sort of start to see what they're going to be in the years to come with him still playing, elite footy. I think Lachie Neale is a fair comparison to make for Zach Merritt, who's still playing great footy at 32. So, yeah, I don't think they're in any rush to rush this and not build something sustainable for themselves, as they sort of haven't been able to for the last sort of 20, 50, however long you want to call it, I guess, 10, 20 years, however long. But just on the defensive side of the ball, I think that they should be improved. I think having Jordan Ridley for the whole year should allow him to recapture his best form after he only managed 9 games last season. He's, in my opinion, he's their best non-Zach Merritt player, and any team that loses their second best player of that quality for the majority of the season is going to struggle to some degree. So I think that has to be taken into account with Essendon's year last year, and especially considering he plays in the back line and had some new pieces to work with as well, with Harry Mackay, of course, coming in there. And I think with the back line, I think that they should be able to find a bit more continuity, but I do worry about the lack of overall size back there. They went into the season last year with Laverde as their second key defender, which probably isn't ideal. I think he maybe cops a little bit of flack unfairly at times, because I do think purely anecdotally, I haven't got a number on that, but I do think he's a solid one-on-one defender. He's okay, but at the end of the day, he is undersized, only being 191 centimetres, and doesn't really provide much of an intercept game. He only averaged 1.9 a game last year, which is below average for his position. So, come to think of it, none of their backline are necessarily amazing in that regard, but I think across the board, as a group collectively, they should be able to generate enough intercepts, with Mackay, Ridley, Laverde, and Mason Redmond too is a sneaky one who gets a lot of intercepts as well. So I think that maybe Mackay is the one that you want a big jump from. I think he's had moments in North Melbourne where he's been in that sort of elite intercept marking group in the competition for a key defender, which of course is nothing to sneeze at, but I think that needs to be taken into account that he played for a North Melbourne team that gave up, extraordinary amounts of inside 50. So that could just be of an outlier in terms of volume that he's managed to do, and be categorised in that elite sort of category there. But Ridley, as I've spoken about, awesome player. I think he's solid, but only above average for his position in terms of intercept marking. And then Mason Redmond, I think, as well, is above average in terms purely statistically. I think that the sort of collective, they might be able to generate enough intercepts, because I think you really need to be able to intercept other teams, obviously, in order to stop them scoring. That's a bit of a duh statement, but also it gives yourselves more of a chance to score off turnover. They were 7th last in 2024 in terms of scores off turnover, so a bit of that's like the amount of opportunities they generated, but also you need to be able to launch from the back line as well, and have that blend of attacking players. And I think that Jordan Ridley in particular, he's the one that they need to get the ball in the hands of more and more this year. He's a great ball user, so I think that he can really help them in both regards there, and hopefully provide value in both of those areas that they kind of lacked last year a little bit, and potentially catapult the Bombers into one of the more elite intercept marking teams if he has a really, really big year. So if the Bombers backline is able to generate some more chemistry this year and intercept at a higher level and then generate scores at a higher level because of that, then I think they're going to give themselves a chance to not only stop opposition scoring, but improve their rebound and transition game themselves. And the main issue for their backline, though, and it's quite a bad one, is that they were dead last. They were the worst team, 18th in the comp last year at defensive one-on-one win rate. So, they lost the highest rate of one-on-ones out of any defense in the league. And I think, although that's a bad stat, and they probably aren't going to turn that around drastically because there's no real personnel changes back there, other than a bit more consistency, it makes what I said about generating that chemistry and leaning into the intercept game even more important, because they can't let each other necessarily defend one-on-one, because, based on that data last year, they're going to lose those one-on-ones more often than any other team in the competition. So, I think that probably plays into the idea that they don't necessarily have enough size down back as it stands, but, I think collectively they're really going to have to work together, and that's going to be the most important thing in terms of, building a sustainable backline for this year for the Bombers. And I'll move into the midfield a little bit for the Bombers, and apparently there's some good things coming out of Windy Hill about Sardis finally, and James Sardis I think his name is, and I'm always a little bit wary of these type of players who have been in the league for a few years, a tip to have a massive season internally, and then when it gets to competing against the other clubs, it doesn't necessarily click. I think we saw that a little bit with Tanner Bruin last year for the Geelong. They were wrapping him up big time coming into the season, and just didn't really provide at the level that you'd expect. They still made a prelim final, so it's not that big of a deal. But just an analogous player, I would want to mention. I hope that Sardis is able to provide something, because they definitely need some other contribution to the midfield, but beyond Zach Merritt. And Sam Durham and Caldwell, they were the three last year that really carried them, and they don't really have a lot of midfield depth, in my opinion, and in terms of just sheer number or quality of midfielders, especially if Darcy Parish is going to have another injury-riddled season. So he's already having some back issues at the moment. But I think that beyond Merritt, Durham, and Caldwell, there really isn't a heap through there at the moment, which is sort of why this emergence of Sardis is going to be paramount for their success in the midfield this year. And I think Jai Caldwell was a great story from last year, breaking out as that defensive stoppage type of midfielder, and I love what he brings in terms of his toughness, but just want to see if he A, keeps it up this year, and B, can provide some more creativity and offense to his game, and become a bit more balanced in that way. And if Sardis, as I said, is that guy to add depth and quality to the midfield group, then with the emergence of Jai Caldwell and Durham last year, you get Sardis in this year, and then of course Zach Merritt is just an absolute gun, so he's going to carry that midfield. If you get all those guys sort of hitting to the same degree they did last year, and the degree that I hope Sardis will this year, then it starts to look like a more complete midfield group, and you can always have the likes of your Greshams, your Perkins, and Nick Martins of the world just chopping them out here and there. But I still think that they would be just an average midfield at this stage. But that being said, but they have a few guys who could take leaps for them and help them out in that regard, and the ceiling definitely would grow for them in that scenario if some of those guys hit. And then Another piece of the midfield, obviously, is the big ruckman. The enigma that is Sam Draper will always, he's going to go a long way in determining how the group as a whole grows. I don't think he's a forward by any means. He can be pretty erratic, and he's not necessarily the best kick, and he's just a ruckman in my view, and I would really want the Dons to treat him as such. He's not only because I just think that's his position, but also like playing two rucks in their forward line just wouldn't be ideal. I don't think playing two rucks is that viable for many teams anymore, unless you have a really, really athletic ruckman like a Luke Jackson or something like that. Which I get that Sam Draper is athletic, but he's not that sort of like skilled big ruckman that that Luke Jackson is, for example. So the main thing he has is his athleticism that gives him a real advantage around the ground in terms of being able to cover the ground that other ruckmen don't necessarily do at the same speed. And I would lean into that if I was Essendon. I think that he can give you a bit more dynamic play to compensate for the maybe lack of quality that the midfield has at times. So I think that, especially not being as dynamic as some of the other top teams in terms of the midfield. So I think that, Sam Draper is definitely one that for them, I'd just be putting him in there as much as possible. He looks like he's come back in great fitness. Sorry, just stumbled through that. But I think he's come back looking really good from the off-season, and there's no reason to play two rucks in my opinion if you're Essendon. I think he just gives you such an advantage in terms of his speed and athleticism around the ground that you just lean into that and hope that he can create a bit of havoc around the stoppages for you. Just getting into the forward line as well now, and I think that the forward line has some nice structure to it now. I think there's some merit to the idea as well that getting rid of Jake Stringer may bring an element of addition by subtraction up forward. I think it will definitely allow guys like Nate Caddy to explore the studio space a bit more, Kyle Langford and Harry Jones to really cement themselves as other focal points of that forward line. And I think that the team could be a bit, at times could be a bit Stringer-centric last year, and the whole time he was there really. So being a little bit less predictable in that way and giving other guys larger roles to be able to contribute more regularly could make them a more well-rounded forward line, and being a bit more unpredictable, I guess, in that way, and the same sort of way that other forward lines have let go of star players. Think of Hawthorn is the one that comes to mind. When they let go of Lance Franklin, you think like, how are they going to cope? But it makes it harder to sort of guard sometimes in that way. So I think there's some real optimism around Essendon's forward line this year, and that's just before I've even had to touch on Isaac Kako and Nate Caddy. I think that people may be expecting a little bit too much from those two guys. Not sure where the narrative has been driven about them sort of being like the saving grace for the Dons, but where that sort of narrative's come from. But they're first and second year players respectively. So the main thing for me is their development, and they keep showing good signs. And if they're able to give any more value on top of that, then that's just icing on the cake, isn't it? And if they can contribute to a winning culture at that age, then you start sort of personally I would start to rethink where I position this team and where I have the outlook on them for this year. So I'm not saying, again, maybe that's where the narrative comes from. Everyone understands they've got a pretty talented list, and if these two guys hit, then it could elevate them up the rankings a little bit. So I guess I can see the hype and why. Like I'm excited about those players individually as well, but I just want to sort of pump the brakes a little bit on the expectations. Like Nate Caddy's like a second year player, key forward. He may not be grabbing the competition by the throat or anything like that. So I think that I'd just be pumping the brakes a little bit and just slowing down everyone's expectations just a touch. And that way, even if they exceed them, then you can get excited about it. So I think both are obviously really exciting players, and Caddy especially is just a special player. I think that last year he showed his blend of size, mobility, and his marking ability especially really caught my eye at least. I think the kicking was questionable at times, but that's the sort of thing that'll just fix itself over time, in my opinion. He's just a really intriguing prospect, and getting him and Isaac Kako together in back-to-back drafts is ideal for Essendon to let them grow together and build that forward line around those two. And Kako himself is as dynamic as you'd want from a small forward, from what I've seen from his draft clips, and he kicked 4 in the practice match the other day down in Geelong, and looks for Essendon fans who haven't caught a lot of him, he looks to be like that Tom Papley, Grime Myers type of player, and that's the sort of dynamic small forward that the Dons have missed since the prime years of Anthony McDonald, Tip and Woody. So I wouldn't necessarily expect that he kicks 4 each week or gets up to Tipper's standards straight away, but I think he's going to provide ground support out of the marking contests and provide pressure where required, and I think the pressure as well that Kako will provide is going to be really something that could be a strong suit for Essendon this year. They have a pretty mobile forward line that pending they don't play with 2 traditional rucks, that is. They were fifth for tackles inside 50 last year, and that's a pretty good mark for the competition already, and that's before they removed Jake Stringer, who of course at times could be a low effort player. So I think that we could see that rise even further, and if they end up being the top 3 team at tackles inside 50 of the competition, then that's going to cause major headaches for opposition teams to play against, and that could be like sort of the foundation of how they create some turnovers. And like I said, if they can help their defense out as much as possible by being a high pressure team in their forward 50, then that makes their defense a lot easier to get set up behind the ball and help each other out, like I said, they might need to do. So I think that, if I'm Essendon, I'm leaning all in on getting as many tackles and putting as much pressure on inside 50. You've got Langford, you've got Harry Jones, you've got Caddy, you've got Kako, you've got Gresham. Like, all these guys should be able to provide pressure. Then they haven't got like a big hulking key forward or anything like that just can't run and is a bit of a liability down there. They have, again, pending no ruckman, but I think that they have a pretty speedy sort of versatile forward line, which hopefully they hang their cap on and go down that road. So with that all being said, I guess I'll just get straight into the players to watch for this team, and for me there's one that stands above the rest, and that's Sam Durham. I've talked about him last year, I've talked about him already on the podcast, but I'm going to talk about him again because he is that good. I think that his size, the speed and ferocity, they're just natural traits you can't really teach. Ex-basketballer, loves to run and carry. He ranked elite for bounces per game for a mid last year. He really upped his disposals from 2023 to 2024. He went +5 in that category, and of course the efficiency took a bit of a dip, which is going to be expected with an increase in volume in his disposals, and especially playing around the stoppages a lot more. And in addition to that, his defensive game took a leap as well, with him being above his position average in tackles inside 50 and pressure acts as well. A lot of that obviously comes around with being around the ball more, but I'm pretty excited to see if he can be a more efficient player this year. And I think if he's able to, he's really going to be able to elevate their midfield to a different level and give Zach Merritt that help that he so needs, I guess, in that way. And based on last year as well, I ran these stats in the statistical profiler, but he came out similar to Dion Prestia, Scott Pendlebury, Jai Caldwell, interestingly enough, Jai Newcomb, James Warple, and also Luke Jackson, which was a bit of a weird one. But I think it's a different group of players. Like, you obviously got the contested guys in Newcomb, Caldwell, Warple, but then a bit of finesse with Pendles as well in there. So I think that you can see those contested streaks coming through him in the statistical profile, and I think as he continues to develop, he's going to be an interesting one to keep watching, and keen to see how he goes this year. I think for me, the ladder projection for Essendon, I've got them at 13th in my power rankings and 13th in the ladder projection as well, which I think might seem a little bit low, but I think I was already sort of lower on them last year than the consensus, so it's not really a demotion, at least not in my book anyway, and I think it's just a similar place as where I would have ranked them last year. So I do acknowledge the possibility that Jake Stringer may have been holding them back to a degree, and if that was the case and the younger guys sort of perform at a higher level than I sort of expect, then I can see them jumping up into the finals. Like, I think their ceiling is still to be able to make the finals. It's just there's so many teams at the moment that are sort of vying for all those spots, and they have, as I'm sort of outlining there, they have one of the wider ranges of outcomes in the competition though, with a few wildcard players, and potential stars coming through the pipeline. If they come on a bit sooner than expected, then that could absolutely vault them up into the top 8 for the year. And I think Dons fans should be very excited for the general development of the team and some of the young players coming into the year. So yeah, that's probably all I've got on the Dons for the year, and excited to see what they can do in round 1 against the Hawks. And should be a big game Friday night. Should hopefully get about 80,000 there. So yeah, excited for that one. Anyway, catch you guys.